Is there anything a creditor could do to defeat a Cook Islands Trust asset protection plan? And the answer is yes, that the Cook Islands Trust are effective, but they're not perfect. And there are tools that a creditor can use to penetrate these trusts. Well, let me give you one example that I've had experience with. And that example is a creditor using involuntary bankruptcy to forcibly put a debtor under the jurisdiction of bankruptcy courts. So there's two parts to what I just said and two parts of the creditor remedy. So the first thing to know is that if you find a debtor in bankruptcy, that the protections of an offshore trust are greatly diminished. And here's why. So for a typical civil creditor in state court, the state court does not have jurisdiction over offshore trustees and offshore assets. The state court judge has his jurisdiction limited to assets and people that are found within the jurisdiction of the court. So a New York court, as an example, a New York judge can affect people in New York and assets in New York, but not assets in New Jersey or Georgia, or certainly not assets in the Cook Islands. In bankruptcy, it's different. So under our federal bankruptcy law, we've given jurisdiction to bankruptcy judges worldwide, meaning that a bankruptcy court has jurisdiction over people and assets all over the world. It's not limited to where the bankruptcy court is located or even to the United States. This means that a bankruptcy court judge has jurisdiction over the debtor's assets in the Cook Islands and has jurisdiction over the Cook Islands Trust. And a bankruptcy court can issue an order forcing the debtor to bring back assets that are outside the court jurisdiction and outside the United States, and to bring back those assets and put them under the jurisdiction of the court and the bankruptcy trustee. And it's a court order, so that if the person in bankruptcy ignores it, they're subject to possible contempt of court for non-compliance with the court order. And there are several cases where this has happened, and in these cases, the bankruptcy judge has incarcerated the bankruptcy debtor for civil contempt, and the bankruptcy debtor is going to jail until such time as he's willing to obey the order and bring back his offshore trust assets into the bankruptcy court. So this is much different than the so-called jurisdictional protection that is promised by the Cook Islands Trust against domestic courts. Well, so your answer, of course, in your mind is, well, I just won't file bankruptcy. But the second part of this discussion today is that it may not just be under your total control. So there is a provision of the bankruptcy code that allows a debtor or group of debtors to force you to file bankruptcy, and it's called involuntary bankruptcy. And the creditor or group of creditors can petition a bankruptcy court to issue an order forcing a particular debtor into the bankruptcy process. Now, fortunately, there are defenses to involuntary bankruptcy. There's risk involved to the creditor, but it does happen, and it has happened to one or more of my clients over the years, and it's not a very comfortable situation for the client, because they find that the protection they thought they had in the Cook Islands Trust is lost when they have been forced into the bankruptcy courts by an involuntary petition. So, what do you do? Well, what you do is that if you're considering an offshore trust, you should work with an attorney who is familiar with the bankruptcy court rules and the rules of involuntary bankruptcy in order to position your assets and your financial situation that makes it much more difficult for someone to force you into bankruptcy court involuntarily. So the attorney you're working with not only has to be knowledgeable in trust law, and particularly foreign trusts, but they should also have a working knowledge of the bankruptcy system to make sure that when you do the offshore trust, you're arranging your other assets and liabilities in a way that makes an involuntary petition much more unlikely, and then will afford you the full protections that you expect from a Cook Islands trust.